Namaste to all of you. Let me tell you something about what is consciousness and what is beyond consciousness. Beyond consciousness means prior to consciousness, or you can say before consciousness. Because in my opinion, consciousness is not the ultimate. Like we are told by many others. Each one has his or her own opinion. So I would request you to keep an open mind and decide for yourself instead of blindly believing. It does become a little controversial or argumentative, but you should remember, I speak on the subject of Advaita Vedanta from the Upanishads, and the Vedas, our scriptures in the Vedas go back thousands of years with no writer, no founder, nobody to take credit, because it was always open to speculation by the Rishi Munis, the sages, one after another, and it kept on evolving, kept on refining. And to top it all, it was spoken in a Sanskrit of those yesteryears, which is very different from today. So most of what is claimed as translation is in fact based with opinions from one to another. So all the more speculation is done. So let us start with the subject of consciousness and how to go beyond. In short, consciousness is that conscious principle which differentiates between the living and the non-living. The living is conscious, from plants, animals to human beings. Human beings are the highest frequency of consciousness, and the animals are less and the plants further less. You can't say a log of wood is conscious or a rock is conscious. Yes, it is the same as energy. Like quantum mechanics says, everything is energy, whether it's a rock, glass, tree, air, thought, anything. Whatever there is there in this universe is what exactly quantum mechanics, which has been inspired by the Vedas, talk the same language. The Vedas said Brahman, everything is Brahman. All that exists is not two. Advaita. Advaita means not two. So, since everything is energy, there has to be. And what is energy? Energy is the ability. Ability to do work, the capacity to do work. That is energy. So, according to science and according to the Vedas, it's metaphysics, waves of energy, where waves turn into particle if there's an observer. And in reality, what they claim is, even matter is nothing but electromagnetic vibration in different frequencies. So ultimately, what are we? Waves of energy, which goes into metaphysics, not into physics, because physics deals with physicality, and that's what science is based upon. So it goes beyond science. So science becomes the objective, and the subject is the subject of spiritualism, from which the object appears. So both complement each other. Spiritualism requires science, science requires spiritualism, because science has to prove what the theory says so, whereas spiritualism does not have to prove. It just gives its dictum. It prophesizes. It's more of a philosophy. It seeks the truth from its philosophy over a period of time which keeps on evolving. But it does not change. Science keeps changing, improving. So science is as important, even though it deals with physicality, and now it is started probing since the last, say, 40 to 50 years through its quantum mechanics theory into the metaphysics realm. It is trying to understand the meaning of consciousness, this conscious principle. So according to the sages, there are five states of consciousness. The waking state, the dream state, the sleeping state. These three can be told by neuroscientists as conscious, subconscious, and the conscious. Then they have the state of Turiya, the fourth. And the fourth is the state of pure consciousness, which they refer to as the soul. And the fifth is given in Shaivism by saying Turiya Titta, that which does not exist. The absolute. The absolute. So if we make an attempt to go beyond consciousness, what happens? Beyond consciousness is absolute. Consciousness cannot be absolute. Consciousness is dual. Consciousness is dual. Dual in the sense that it is attached to the mind. It is a construct of the mind. Your mind becomes conscious when it thinks with concentration. Otherwise, it goes into lower consciousness, referred to as subconsciousness, which I said as the dream state. That is why our sages said that even while awake, we are asleep, because we are in a subconscious state, in auto mode. Without using the conscious brain, we are multitasking into this or that. And this is the consciousness then attaches to your feelings and emotions and becomes conscious on what the mind is focused upon. So consciousness is dual. It's relative. It's relative and it's dual. As long as it is in the dream state. But the sages said, the true self is the pure consciousness, the soul. But the soul is also dual. Because the soul is the midway between the mind and the cosmos. It receives and transmits cosmic energy. So pure consciousness is not a performer, it only witnesses. It is also referred as the witnessing consciousness, which only witnesses. It does not perform or experience anything, whereas consciousness experiences. But the pure consciousness, the witnessing consciousness, simply performs, simply witnesses, watches and witnesses. And that is how the sages considered that to be pure. But there's a paradox in it. And the paradox is, even if it is pure, the moment the soul is individualized, it creates a segregation. The absoluteness is disturbed. And when it watches and observes, meaning the individual, he or a she, watches and witnesses, there is a certain feeling for its outcome. Like, for example, an eagle is watching and witnessing what is happening below, but the outcome is to pounce on its prey. Same is the case with a lion and a tiger. So even while you are watching and witnessing, there is a slight element which disturbs the purity and the totality. So the soul cannot be referred as a absolute. Absolute means in totality, wholesomeness, holistic. Then consciousness is restricted to space and time. Why? Because it is attached to the body and mind. The moment it is attached to the body and mind, it is restricted. Whereas absoluteness is the universe. The 95% or 96% of dark matter and energy, which is in equilibrium. And the rest is matter and consciousness in the form of planets, stars, earth, to everything. What we have conceptualized is hardly 4%. So the absolute in totality is the parent of all energies, from which subset energies emerge. Transient, temporary, for the time that is there, whether it's the sun, moon, the planet or anything, they all come and they disappear into the dark energy, into dark waves of energy, which the sages referred to as shunya, nothingness. So absolute in fact cannot be described in words and language because it refers to nothingness, absolute totality of the universe. 96% is dark energy representing nothing. In fact, we also came out from that nothing to go back into that nothing. And the moment this energy moves and vibrates in different frequencies, it condenses, it solidifies into various objects for the while that they exist, whether it's the sun, moon or anything. We'll all come and go. So, consciousness is not absolute. It is dual. It is dual. And then we should know that consciousness is what we are. It is our individuality. It is our individuality. It is our uniqueness. It is our wakefulness. It is our aliveness. It is what which makes the mind active, triggers the mind, alivens the mind. Otherwise, the mind is mechanical. Without the consciousness, the mind is nothing. Mind is nothing. So consciousness settles in the memory as the rememberer, extracting from its past awareness what the memory has stored and projects that into the future by being conscious in the present moment. So past, present and future to experience. To experience. So consciousness is dual. But then what is the source of consciousness? What is the source? Because as an individual, you cannot be consciousness. You cannot be that soul. You cannot. Why? Because you can watch your own consciousness. You can feel your own consciousness. You know when your mind is working in subconscious level, when it is working in conscious level, meaning you are not consciousness. Consciousness is the quantum, it's the content of what you are, it's the quantity. It's not you, who you are, it's what you are. Who you are is separate or different. Why? Because it can watch its own consciousness. So you cannot be consciousness. You cannot be that Atman which many others claim. Yes, they claim that it is the true self. But who? The true individual self, which is temporary, which is constantly changing from child consciousness, youth consciousness to all sorts of consciousness. So it is changing. And something which is changing cannot be considered as absolute, because absolute is in totality. It is unchanging or non-changing. It is spaceless. It is limitless. It is the universe. It is timeless. It is one without a second. It is the ultimate reality. The rest is all relative reality, with its body, with its mind and consciousness attached to its likes and dislikes, also becomes relative. Because consciousness has to attach to one dual or the other, into this or that. Either you become conscious of the heat or you become conscious of the cold. Either you become conscious of the divine or you become conscious of the devil at any given time, moment, existential moment. So, consciousness is not absolute. The absolute is who you are, which is very difficult to describe in words. Very difficult. But you can understand. You can only understand what is the absolute. It's because it's who you are. Waves of energy, pure, total energy, impartial, and in totality. It is not aware of its own self. It is nothing. Because it's not aware of its own self, it is nothing in that nothingness. But from that nothingness, something comes out. That is consciousness, which is everything to us. Because of consciousness, the world is there in front of you. It appears and disappears. Because consciousness is the world for you. Everything appears and disappears. If the consciousness was not there, like it is not there in a rock, it would not appear and disappear. So the whole world relies upon that consciousness, but still it's relative. The source is the absolute, which provides that ability to the consciousness to make the mind first aware and then conscious. It's only after the mind becomes aware that it can become conscious. Meaning, awareness does not require consciousness, but consciousness is dependent on awareness. So awareness is who you are and consciousness is what you are. The content. And awareness is the subject. And awareness was referred to by the sages as Paratma, Paramatma, beyond Atma, Parameshwar, Parabrahman, beyond Brahman, beyond energy, meaning the supreme ability of energy, which is not aware of itself, but it is there, which the mind has, the phenomenal mind has the power to extract from this noumenal. The phenomenal mind has the power to extract and utilize for it to become conscious, in order to perceive and conceive, and then to experience and infer, and after that to realize, to become wise. To become wise. So absolute is that Parabrahman. Absolute is that Parabrahman. It is that Turiya Titta, that Shiva, which does not exist. It is that force of energy from which the field illuminates or radiates. Like the sun is the force of energy, and light is its field of energy, which provides life, which sustains life. And awareness is that force of energy which radiates consciousness, which radiates a field of consciousness. The force and the field. The field originates from the force and spreads and illuminates. So, if you want to understand What is prior to consciousness? It is this absoluteness, it is this Parabrahman, the Paratma, the source of consciousness, and through that awareness comes out this everything for us, which appears and disappears. So when the body and mind, after that, when it goes back into its dust, even consciousness collapses. So body and mind and soul, all three collapse. It is not eternal, it is finite. Whereas the absolute, in which the soul goes back into the universe, is that eternal, infinite, absolute, Parabrahman or Atma. And that is beyond the individual soul and the individual consciousness, which as it goes lower, it goes into ego consciousness. As it goes higher, it goes towards the soul, which you consider as being spiritual. Thank you for listening. Namaste.